Why do some wives feel isolated in their own marriages? Have you ever felt like you're living with a stranger? Not because of an affair, not because of a betrayal, but because the person you married, the person you once shared everything with, has become someone you barely recognize. You sleep beside him, share the same bed, the same space, but when you look at him, something feels missing. It's not the physical distance, but the emotional gap that has quietly grown between the two of you over time. You've built a life together, raised children, faced challenges, celebrated victories, and endured losses. On the outside, everything seems perfectly fine. But somewhere along the way, things changed. And you feel it, a quiet ache that no one else seems to see. You're not alone, but you feel so alone. It's a strange kind of loneliness, isn't it? The kind that creeps in when you're not looking. The kind that doesn't show up with loud arguments or dramatic exits, but in small, quiet moments of silence. When you ask him how his day was, but his response is just a passing word, nothing more. When you make dinner and he's there, but it's as though you're just two people sharing space rather than sharing a life. And it's not just him. You wonder if you've lost yourself along the way too. Maybe you've stopped reaching out because it feels like no one is really there to catch you. Maybe you've stopped sharing your hopes, your fears, your heart, because you're afraid they won't matter. And so, little by little, day by day, you pull back. You build walls, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. You're still married, but the woman you used to be in this relationship feels far away. You wonder if you'll ever feel seen again. If the closeness you once shared is even possible now. And here's the hardest truth. This isn't uncommon. Many wives feel this way, even if it's hard to admit, even if it's painful to say aloud. The emotional isolation that creeps into a marriage isn't something people talk about often, but it's real, and it hurts. But today, we're talking about it. Because your feelings are valid, your pain is real, and there's hope if you're ready to look at what's really happening beneath the surface. This is the beginning of understanding why so many wives feel isolated, even when they're not alone. And the journey to healing starts with acknowledging the truth, even if it's difficult to face. Underlying causes of isolation. 1. Lack of emotional intimacy. When the emotional bond that once connected you both begins to fade, you might not even notice at first. It's not a sudden break. It's a gradual, quiet erosion that happens over time. The long talks late into the night, the shared dreams, the inside jokes that only the two of you understood, they slowly diminish. Conversations become practical, transactional, about bills, about schedules, about things that need doing. But there's no longer room for the emotional sharing that once made you feel alive in each other's presence. You stop talking about your fears, your desires, your thoughts. And with that loss of intimacy comes a deeper sense of isolation. You might be in the same room, the same bed, but the person who once knew you so well feels like a stranger. 2. Overwhelming responsibilities. There's a certain heaviness that comes with carrying the weight of a household on your shoulders. Many wives, whether working full-time, caring for children, or managing the home, often feel like they're doing it all alone. And when you're constantly caught up in responsibilities, there's little space left for connection. You may find yourself emotionally drained, too tired to even initiate a conversation. And over time, your husband might not even notice the exhaustion building up within you. When you're constantly giving without receiving, it's easy to feel invisible. You're not just overwhelmed with tasks. You're overwhelmed by the emotional weight of doing it all alone. You might be physically surrounded by your family, but emotionally, you're carrying the world on your shoulders. 3. Communication breakdown. One of the most subtle, yet powerful forces behind emotional isolation is the breakdown in communication. As life gets busier and the years go by, couples can fall into patterns where they no longer communicate meaningfully. The small conversations that once sparked connection now turn into quick exchanges about chores or children's schedules. There's no real engagement, no real listening. And it isn't that you don't love each other. It's just that you've stopped sharing your inner worlds. Over time, this lack of communication creates a rift. When your partner doesn't hear you, it's easy to start feeling like you don't matter. When there's no dialogue, there's no way to connect emotionally. The more you try to reach out, the more you feel unheard, and the more isolated you become. 4. Emotional neglect or unmet needs. Another painful cause of isolation is the experience of emotional neglect. Over the years, as the relationship matures, one partner may become emotionally unavailable, either because of stress, burnout, or simply growing apart. Perhaps he doesn't notice when you're upset or when you need support. Perhaps he's more focused on his own world, his own thoughts, leaving you to manage yours alone. When your emotional needs go unmet, you begin to feel invisible in the relationship. You stop seeking connection because it feels futile. And that's where the isolation sets in. The deep, gnawing feeling that your partner is physically present, but emotionally absent. You've tried to reach out, but your needs are never truly met. And soon, you stop trying. 5. Changes in the relationship. Dynamic relationships are fluid. They change, but sometimes those changes aren't acknowledged, and they create emotional distance. As life evolves, kids grow up, careers change, personal goals shift, the dynamic in the marriage shifts too. Perhaps one of you has adapted to these changes more readily than the other. Perhaps one partner feels like they're being left behind, or like they're no longer seen as the person they once were in the marriage. As these changes accumulate, one partner may start to feel like they're living in the past, while the other is moving forward. The emotional disconnect that follows these changes can be incredibly isolating, especially when it feels like you're not growing together, but rather apart. The more the relationship shifts, the less you recognize the person lying next to you, and the more distant you become. Manifestations of isolation. 1. Emotional withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal is often the first and most painful sign of isolation in a marriage. It doesn't happen overnight, but gradually, a wife may find herself pulling back emotionally from her husband. At first, she may still try to reach out. Small gestures, attempts at conversation, moments when she hopes to feel connected again. But when those attempts go unnoticed or unreciprocated, she starts to shut down. The feeling of rejection, even if it's unspoken, takes its toll. She doesn't want to feel invisible. But over time, the emotional distance grows, and it becomes easier to retreat into herself rather than risk further disappointment. You stop trying to share your feelings, not because you no longer care, but because it hurts too much when he doesn't listen. 2. Physical proximity, emotional distance. The wife may still share a bed, eat meals together, and live under the same roof. But the emotional connection has evaporated, and even though they're physically close, they are emotionally worlds apart. They pass each other in the hallway with little more than a glance. The moments of connection that once felt intimate and real are now rare, fleeting, and often feel like mere obligations. What used to be shared laughter and long conversations now feels like routine. She might lie next to him at night, but her heart is far from his. You sleep beside him, but the distance feels greater than it's ever been before. 3. Feeling unseen or unheard. One of the most profound aspects of emotional isolation is the feeling of being invisible, of having your needs, feelings, and desires completely overlooked. When a wife constantly feels like she is giving, caring, and nurturing, yet her own emotional needs go unmet, she begins to question her worth in the relationship. She might express her frustrations, but her words fall on deaf ears. This lack of recognition, this absence of being truly heard, can lead to deep emotional pain. It's a form of loneliness that can feel more painful than physical distance, because it stems from the emotional rejection she experiences in the very relationship she holds dear. You've tried to speak up, tried to make him understand, but each time you feel like you're shouting into a void. 4. Guilt and shame. Perhaps the most insidious manifestation of isolation is the guilt and shame that can come with it. A wife might feel guilty for feeling lonely in a marriage. She may blame herself for not being able to make her marriage work, or for not being able to communicate her feelings effectively. She might feel like there's something wrong with her for not being happy, when everyone else seems to think her life is perfect. This guilt can be overwhelming, especially when she's tried so hard to make the marriage work, yet still feels emotionally abandoned. She may begin to internalize these feelings, thinking she's the problem, when in reality it's the emotional neglect in the relationship that's causing the pain. You wonder if you're asking for too much, or if you're just imagining things. But deep inside, you know that something is missing. 5. Resentment and bitterness. Over time, if emotional neglect continues, feelings of resentment can build up. It's not just that she feels alone, it's that she feels unappreciated and unloved. Small actions that once seemed harmless, like her husband's indifference or lack of support, turn into deep-seated bitterness. She might begin to resent the emotional labor she carries alone, the constant giving without receiving. This resentment can fester and make it even harder to reconnect. You begin to question how much longer you can keep giving when he seems content to take, without ever noticing how much it costs you emotionally. The emotional toll of isolation. These manifestations, emotional withdrawal, physical closeness with emotional distance, the feeling of being unseen, guilt, and growing resentment, create a profound emotional toll. The wife, who once found comfort and companionship in her marriage, now feels like she's lost herself in the process. And the hardest part is that it doesn't look like a crisis. There's no moment where you can point to and say, "This is when everything fell apart." It's slow, subtle, and it creeps in quietly, leaving behind a heartache that only the wife feels. Impact on the wife's well-being. 1. Mental health effects, anxiety and depression. Emotional isolation doesn't just hurt the heart, it impacts the mind. For many wives who experience this sense of loneliness, anxiety and depression become constant companions. It's not just the sadness of feeling alone, but the overwhelming weight of carrying that loneliness day after day, month after month. The constant emotional drain can lead to feelings of hopelessness, making it harder to find joy in daily life, or to believe that the situation can change. Every small act of connection seems to slip further out of reach, and the silence in the marriage feels like an echo that grows louder and louder. Over time, it can lead to a sense of emotional numbness, a form of mental exhaustion where the person just doesn't feel anything anymore. You start to wonder if you're broken, if you'll ever feel alive again, or if you're just too tired to care anymore. 2. Physical health effects, stress and fatigue. The emotional burden of isolation can also manifest physically. When the mind is in constant turmoil, when there is a perpetual feeling of neglect, the body reacts. Stress becomes a constant companion, and it wears down the body over time. Chronic fatigue, headaches, difficulty sleeping, and digestive issues can all be physical manifestations of emotional isolation. What many wives don't realize is that emotional neglect doesn't only hurt the soul, it wears out the body too. The stress from carrying the emotional weight of a marriage alone can lead to chronic health problems that go unnoticed until they become severe. It's exhausting, isn't it? The constant pressure of trying to stay strong, while your body whispers that it's too much. 3. Loss of self-esteem and identity. When emotional isolation sets in, the wife may slowly begin to lose herself. She stops seeing her value outside of her role as a wife and mother. Over time, the emotional neglect she faces from her partner can lead to a loss of self-worth. She feels like she's not good enough or that her feelings don't matter. Her identity, once shared with her husband, begins to erode. She might stop engaging in things she once loved or putting energy into personal goals because it feels pointless. When she tries to reach out, she's met with indifference, and that indifference starts to make her question her worth. You used to have dreams, passions, things that made you feel alive. Now, all that's left is the routine, the responsibilities, and the overwhelming feeling that no one sees you for who you really are. 4th, strained relationships with others. This emotional isolation doesn't just affect the wife's relationship with her husband, it extends to her relationships with others. When you're emotionally drained, it becomes difficult to connect with friends, family, or even children. The loneliness she feels within her marriage can spill over into other areas of her life. She might find herself withdrawing from social activities, isolating herself further, feeling too exhausted to engage with anyone else. You find yourself saying, "I'm fine," when people ask how you're doing, but deep down, you're struggling just to get through each day. The silent erosion of self. The emotional toll of isolation is often a silent one, eroding not just the relationship, but the wife's very sense of self. The woman who once stood strong, confident, and connected to her partner can start to feel like a shadow of herself. She begins to wonder if the woman she used to be even exists anymore. But here's the truth. She does exist. She's still there, deep inside, beneath the layers of emotional fatigue and exhaustion. The key is to recognize this pain for what it is: a cry for connection, a need for recognition, and a call for change. What can be done to reconnect? 1. Honest communication. The first step toward healing. The most powerful tool for reconnecting is honest communication. For many wives, the feeling of isolation stems from a lack of meaningful conversation. They feel unheard, unimportant, or invisible in their own marriages. But that can change. It all begins with vulnerability, the courage to speak the truth, even when it feels difficult. If you feel emotionally distant, start by gently expressing how you feel. This isn't about accusing or blaming. It's about sharing your truth in a way that opens the door for understanding. You might say, "I've been feeling alone lately," and it's not about you being physically absent. It's about feeling emotionally disconnected. The most important thing is to start talking about your emotions, not just your tasks. Share your hopes, fears, dreams, and frustrations. Let your husband in. 2. Seeking professional help, therapy, and counseling. Sometimes the emotional distance in a marriage is too deep to navigate alone. Seeking professional help, whether through couples therapy or individual counseling, can provide both partners with the tools they need to rebuild their connection. Therapists offer a neutral space where both partners can express their feelings without judgment, helping them understand each other's needs and perspectives. Marriage counseling doesn't mean your relationship is failing. It means you're willing to invest in it and grow together. For many couples, therapy helps to identify underlying issues, such as unmet emotional needs or unhealthy communication patterns, that need to be addressed in order to rebuild the relationship. 3. Rebuilding emotional intimacy. Small steps, big changes. Rebuilding emotional intimacy takes time, patience, and effort. But it is possible. Emotional intimacy is not just about physical touch. It's about being present with each other, mentally and emotionally. Start small. Ask questions about your husband's day that go beyond, "How was work?" Share stories. Talk about your childhood. or revisit the memories that once made you both laugh. A meaningful touch, like holding hands or sitting close, can make a world of difference. The simple act of being present with each other can help reignite a sense of connection that may have been lost. Even small gestures, like a hand on the shoulder, a soft touch, or a genuine, "How are you feeling?" can create bridges where there were once walls. 4. Self-care and reclaiming your own identity. Before you can reconnect with your husband, it's important to reconnect with yourself. When you're emotionally isolated in a marriage, it's easy to lose sight of who you are outside of your role as a wife and mother. Take time for self-care. Engage in activities that make you feel alive, creative, and fulfilled. Whether it's reading, walking, practicing a hobby, or spending time with friends, doing things for yourself is essential for emotional well-being. By reconnecting with your own passions and needs, you'll feel more balanced, more grounded, and better able to offer emotional support to your partner. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Nurture yourself first, and you'll have more to give. 5. Reassessing the marriage. Setting new expectations. As time passes, relationships evolve. So should your understanding of what your marriage looks like. Perhaps your expectations of one another need to be reassessed and updated. Sit down with your husband and talk about what you both need from the relationship moving forward. Perhaps there are new goals, new dreams, or new ways of supporting each other that can help the marriage thrive. This isn't about finding blame or fault. It's about working together to create a marriage that meets both of your needs. Marriage is a partnership, and like any partnership, it requires regular check-ins and adjustments. Don't be afraid to redefine your relationship as you grow together. The road to reconnection. Reconnecting is not an overnight process. It requires effort, patience, and most importantly, a willingness to be vulnerable. It's about opening your heart to your partner, allowing yourself to be seen, and taking the necessary steps to rebuild the emotional bond that once brought you together. It's also about acknowledging that emotional isolation is a real challenge, but it's not a challenge that has to define your marriage forever. By addressing the causes of isolation and taking intentional actions to reconnect, both partners can begin to heal, grow, and rediscover the love and intimacy that once existed. It's never too late to reconnect. The emotional isolation that so many wives experience is often quiet, unspoken, and incredibly painful. It's easy to feel like you're alone in your struggles, but you are not. You are not broken. The isolation you're feeling is a symptom of an unmet need for connection, and it's possible to rebuild that bridge step by step.